Hey, hi everyone. Welcome back to the Advanced Mortgage Solutions podcast. Welcome back again to Brent Selwyn from KT Law.
Thank you, Joel. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us again, Brent. Look, the topic today is around the biggest mistakes that first home buyers make and how to avoid them. Can you give us a few examples that you've seen in your time and why it's important to seek legal representation before you even start to look for a home?
Yeah, I think the first point you've just hit on is that it makes a lot of sense for a first home buyer, particularly, to reach out to a lawyer before they do anything. With a lot of homes being marketed by deadline or auction, it's really important to get advice. And also to make sure that the contract includes all of the clauses that you will need for your protection. And a simple way of ensuring that is just to do what I do and to say to the client, look, no cost to you, send it through to me. I'll have a look at it. If there's anything that needs adding or taking out, I'll let you know before you sign it. So I
Right.
think that's the biggest mistake is agents convincing someone to sign something without having it reviewed. And that's not to pick on agents. Most agents are really good. But sometimes we do get contracts that just arrive and we've had no input whatsoever.
Yeah.
And there's not a finance condition, or the agent said to them, oh, you don't need to get a building inspection report because it's a new property. It's always better to have that discussion with a lawyer before you sign the contract.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And we talked about a couple of things before we kicked this podcast off, and one of them was understanding LIM reports. Tell us about a LIM report and why it's important to at least have a basic knowledge of what it is.
Yeah, the LIM reports, it's a standard thing that all buyers should get, particularly for pre-loved homes. There might be an argument about, buying bare land and whether you need one, but I would always advocate to get a LIM. There is actually a case law that says you are supposed to get your own LIM and pay for it yourself.
Right.
Selwyn District Council and Monticello Holdings. We try to take a practical view of that. If someone's going to an auction and the agent and the vendor have provided a LIM and it's a week old, I will tell people about the law, but I'll also say, look, it's unlikely that anything's going to have changed in a week. So I take a pragmatic view of that whilst pointing out the legal situation. The property law section of New Zealand is trying to get the legislation changed so that people can rely on the LIM if it's within a certain time frame.
Yeah.
So the LIM is a document which will tell us the permit and consent history, whether there are code compliances for all structures. What it doesn't tell me is if there's any illegal structure, something that's been erected without a permit. And that's why I rely on the client and a building inspection to actually ascertain that, there isn't a conservatory which has been knocked up without a consent.
Yeah.
The LIM also has been updated recently by particularly the Christchurch Council. So there's now a lot more flood information available for properties in Christchurch.
Right.
And that will tell us, for example, whether a property might be in an area which might be prone to a 1 in 10 year event, a 1 in 50 year event, a 1 in 100 year event. And clients can make an informed decision. There are a lot of links in the LIM that I send to clients so they can have a look at the particular property and previous events. So there's an awful lot in a LIM, and I would always advocate a client getting one. In Christchurch, it costs $290. And they should need to pay for what's called a fast track, which is $390.
Right. Okay. It makes sense to definitely have access to one, in my opinion, if you're making such a large purchase as a new home. And you mentioned earlier about building inspections. Why is it important to have a building inspection? I mean, it's a bit of a basic question, but tell us why it's important and maybe some of the, examples where you've seen that hasn't been carried out and,
Oh, I've seen some real horror stories over the years. And look, I'm not going to pick on any particular company, but there's been a real burgeoning of numbers, huge growth in that industry. So there are lots and lots of companies providing building inspection reports. Some are really quite simplistic. And others are very in-depth. Agents would argue some are too in-depth. I personally am a big fan of getting a really good building inspection report. Because one of the examples I gave in our previous podcast was that if a building inspector has a copy of the scope of works for a pre-earthquake home, they can go around the property and look, yep, that crack's been repaired, that foundation has been repaired, it's been leveled. So I think an experienced builder will obviously see things that you and I won't.
Yeah.
Say to people, look, I'm not a qualified builder. I don't get to see the home. So
Yeah.
rely very much on a building inspection report.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then tell us a little bit about KiwiSaver. A lot of first home buyers are looking to use their KiwiSaver to buy a home. Obviously, it's a really large topic, but why is it important? Would it be important to speak to, again, a solicitor around the KiwiSaver side of things?
Yeah, look, it's a fabulous innovation. I love that first home buyers can access their KiwiSaver minus the initial start contribution from the government.
Mm.
Important steps are that when you're dealing with your mortgage advisor from Advanced Mortgage Solutions, get a copy of a pre-approval letter telling you what your approved funds are. In volatile times, I normally suggest to people, look, I'm not a financial advisor, but you might want to think about putting it into a slightly less risky portfolio, so that, because I had situations where we go to draw down the KiwiSaver and it's 2 or 3 or 4,000 less than there was when they had their initial letter.
Right.
Things to be aware of: you cannot start the process to withdraw from your KiwiSaver until you have an offer accepted. The moment you get your offer accepted, agents tend to put 10 working days for approval of finance. KiwiSaver providers will take, in some cases, 10 to 15 days to process those. So I normally try and get clients in the day after the contract's signed.
Yeah.
It's important then that they bring their photo ID, proof of address, the pre-approval letter, and then we send that away to the provider. Normally, if we can, the day after, or no sooner than a couple of days after. And so timing is very important. And sooner that a buyer gets in touch with the lawyer, there is the fact that a KiwiSaver withdrawal application can be witnessed by a registered legal executive, a justice of the peace, or a lawyer. So some of our clients will go to a JP, where the justice of the peace will stamp and approve and verify their ID, proof of address, for us.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Right. Look, and then finally, I think an important one, which we touched on earlier, was around the earthquake side of things. Obviously, as a first home buyer, buying from, existing housing stock within Canterbury that may have gone through the earthquakes. What are some of the key things you'd look for there, or advise someone looking to buy?
Just very important to, if possible, to make sure that earthquake residual rights and claims are assigned, and also to do everything within our power between the buyer, the lawyer, and the building inspector to make sure that all of the damage has been repaired. And now, as I always say to clients, I don't see the house. So I'm looking at a bit of paper that tells me Joe Blogg's developer was a building company was engaged to do repairs, but that doesn't tell me whether those repairs were done well. You might have heard that there was a scheme introduced by the government called the on-sold program. And the on-sold program was for homes where someone in good faith had bought a home that had been repaired, and yet the damage hadn't been repaired properly. And in some cases, I saw clients out of their home for 6 months, and payments, they were what called an ex-gratia payment of sometimes $300,000-$400,000. So all the more reason why, I guess, in a very long-winded way, that we do as much as we possibly can to make sure that all earthquake claims have been settled and repairs completed properly.
Yeah, brilliant. Hey, look, and then the last one is the good old title. What's important about checking the title? Give us a...
There are titles and titles, Joel.
Yes.
One of the things we look at when we see someone buying a property.
Yeah.
And we love to see titles where there are no interests or memorials whatsoever on the title.
Yeah. Sorry, Brent, I'll stop you there. What does that mean if there's an interest or a memorial on a title? Someone looking...
Let's say, for example, you're buying one of 2 properties at the rear behind 2 street fronting properties. They're what's called an easement. And an easement is a document whereby one owner grants a right or rights to another owner, normally an adjacent owner, over part of their land. So use the example of 2 rear sections with a shared driveway. All of the services will go up that driveway. So there'll be a right of way, there'll be a right to convey electricity, water, sewer, media, telephone. although not many people have landlines anymore. And so it's important that we make sure that all of those easements are correct and there's nothing missing. And look, for older properties, often the deposit plans prepared by the surveyors from the 1950s and before, they're colour coded.
Right.
We've got to try and get a copy of the colour plan because it'll say that there's an easement to convey sewer and stormwater and water over the area marked blue.
Okay.
Luckily, modern day surveyors use A, B, C, D, E, and so on, which makes it a heck of a lot easier for us. So, yeah, titles are a really important part of a lawyer's job. As I say, we cringe a bit sometimes when there are 15 easements or land covenants. And again, if you want me to explain, a land covenant in a modern subdivision is a document which sets quality controls, what materials you should and shouldn't use, whether you can have certain types of animal like dogs. And they'd almost always say that you should have the developer's approval before you commence construction. So there's all sorts of nuances with titles, and it is a huge part of our job.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, it sounds like there's so many technicalities and things that you check for on every transaction.
Yeah, there certainly are.
Brilliant. All right, Brent. Well, look, thanks so much for joining us today. If someone wants to get hold of you and book an appointment, tell us how they go about that.
Yeah, so like all websites, the website for KT Law, ktlaw.co.nz, has a contact or submissions page where you can enter your name, contact details, and the nature of your query. Typically, we will get half a dozen or so a day, people inquiring about a purchase and what, could we let them know our fixed fees and so on. So, yeah, that's how to get hold of us.
Brilliant. All right, Brent. Well, thanks for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode and talk to you soon.
Thank you very much.